Okay, welcome everybody to this webinar about synthetic data and how can it can be generated with MakeYourData, which is a tool that we developed at Argusa. I am Luca and Tomà is with me. We are consultants at Argusa, and I'll be guiding through this presentation. There will be a short introduction from me and then a demo of the tool in action by Tomà. So first of all, what is synthetic data? Synthetic data is essentially data that is artificially generated with engineered properties. And there are industries where this is already an established technology. For example, the automotive industry, where for training cars to drive themselves, they have to generate simulations because it's not always politically correct. For example, run over people to just test their cars. So you generate fake data to train the algorithms. And Gartner predicts that synthetic data will soon reach the hype in a few years, and it will become a mature market in about 5 years. So what are the challenges that you can solve with synthetic data? Of course, as you well know, data is everywhere, but often it's not available in the format you need or when you need it. So, for example, this could be due to confidentiality of the information that prevents to share the data, sometimes with external providers or also within the same company. And this lowers mindsets and create a feeling that data cannot be freely used, slowing down in innovation. And also, there could be a real lack of data if you're developing a new application and data is not yet available for this use case. One use case is also machine learning, where a lot of data is required to train models, and often is not available in the amount needed. So you can generate synthetic data to augment datasets and improve trainings. So there are two main types of synthetic data. It's rule-based synthetic data, where essentially there is not necessarily data in input, but you generate your data uniquely based on rules. These rules can be, for example, give me a date in an interval, and then another date which comes after the first one. These cases could be, use cases for this kind of synthetic generations could be prototyping, also building demo data and testing your applications. On the other end, we have, of the spectrum, we have statistically generated data, where the rules are partially or completely learned from an input dataset. For example, you can imagine having some population data and wanting to reproduce similar properties as the input dataset. And here use cases could be anonymizing, but also augmenting data to train machine learning models, and testing, so injecting essentially test cases in real data. The very end of the spectrum, there is also the AI generated synthetic data, which is the extreme version of statistically generated, and the full model essentially is learned automatically by an algorithm. So let's go to MakeYourData, which is the tool we developed to generate synthetic datasets. Synthetic data, MakeYourData is a comprehensive solution that can generate both rule-based and statistically generated data, and also from all data types. It includes several connectors that are available to fetch data where it is, and it needs minimal training to be used. So again, a couple of use cases of the tool are the same as synthetic data. Essentially, you can imagine anonymizing an existing dataset, and here I have a dataset with customer names that cannot be shared with some external support that will make your dashboards. You can imagine anonymizing these names, but not just with IDs. You can keep the semantics and anonymizing with another name, for example. The other use case is generating just synthetic data out of nothing to build a prototype of these dashboards. And the more insights on the functionalities that are provided. So there are two modes essentially: from scratch, which corresponds to completely rule-based, and from source, where you can do statistically generated data. And if you use a source, you can have different levels. So you can choose to keep part of the dataset as it is and just generate some of the columns, some of the properties, or all of it. You can also decide to just anonymize, which means hiding data but keeping the structure of the lines, or synthesize, which means really creating a completely new data set, generating new lines. Also, along the way, you can edit and customize several properties of the dataset, including duplicates, to remove them or add them, outliers, missing values. Also, you can set constraints so that the dataset that comes out makes sense, let's say, and much more. You also have a system to trace back the data to the original data if you need. This can be useful, for example, if you can imagine anonymizing a dataset for an hospital that don't need information about the name of the patient, but only its measurements. But when they find the diagnosis and the patient is ill, then you want to contact him. So you want to go back, to be able to go back to the original data somehow. Also, the tool produces documentation for compliance and can be integrated with other tools, for example, Tableau Prep, to integrate it in a data flow. Before the demo, just a couple of words about the series of these webinars. This is a series of 4 webinars about prototyping and testing today. The next one will be in 2 weeks about anonymizing. And there will be 2 more in autumn. The dates are still to define, but those will be about building data for demos and building datasets, augmenting datasets for training machine learning models. So the next one will be on 5th July about anonymizing. A couple more words about today webinar. So this is about prototyping and testing. So we'll see that you can generate data of all kinds, so of all data types, strings, dates, numbers. You can build sequences, for example, of strings, data, numbers, and so on, and build correlations between them. You can generate data that looks familiar, for example, using your own product names and your own names of employees, if you want. And you can ensure consistencies by setting limits and constraints, but also introduce inconsistencies to test your applications and make them robust. And for example, add outliers, mismatches, and duplicates. With this, the introduction is done, and I leave the floor to Thomas, that will show you the tool in action. We cannot hear it, Thomas.
So the demo will consist on a product, someone that is responsible for projects in a company that is not yet very data-driven. However, he feels that increasing data about project may...
Wait, did you share the screen?
Yeah,
yes.
May lead to better insights on the projects and will benefit the company. He wants to propose, you want to propose a project management tool to your bosses. However, they don't see yet quite the benefit on using it, and they want to have a proof of concept. However, now the only data on projects you have is the data I show here. So you have a project ID a project manager, a project name, and a start date. And the project management tool offers you to record due dates and end dates of projects. You don't have this data yet, and you need it for the proof of concept. So MakeYourData will allow you to generate both columns. To do so, we'll go to MakeYourData. This is the home page, and we'll start a new project. We have several options to load data. So we can load from CSV, Excel, or Tableau files, or SQL databases, and if you don't have data, from scratch. Here we have the table I've just shown, and I'll load it.
You should share the desktop.
So I load the projects from my homepage of MakeYourData. And here I can have an overview of my first 50 rows of data. I see that I don't have any end date or due date. And I can have a little summary, statistical summary of each columns. So I have 100 lines, and I see that my minimal date is beginning of 2016 and maximal date is end of 2021. I load the columns so I'm able to generate the end date and due date. Just remove these none columns as they don't benefit the view. And here we have the 4 first columns we have in our data. So project ID, project manager, project name, and start date. On the right side, we have an overview of the changes we've made here with the input column and the output column. And just under, we have the part where we can modify the generation of data. So first of all, I'll create a due date. This will simply be a new column of the date time type. So I go here in add a column from scratch and date time, and I'll call it due date. As I'll generate new data, I'll change generation mode to synthesize. I don't need the time in the date, so I'll just change the data domain to date. And my distribution to generate this new data will be a random distribution. I have to change the mean and max of the distribution. So we've seen that data start date spans from start of 2016 to end of 2021. So I'll just put my range here to the same range. I save. And of course, I have to add a constraint as due date must always be after start date. So I'll manage constraints and I'll say that due date should be greater than start date. And I'll just add a constraint to say that projects cannot last more than 1 year. So for the extent, I put 1 year. So here I have a constraint that says that due date is bigger than start date, but smaller than start date plus 1 year. Close. And now I want to generate an end date. So end date should be close to due date, and it's just due date. Now we'll generate it by creating a small noise around due date. To do so, I'll just copy the generated due date column. I'll call it end date. And because I'll add a noise, it's an anonymization part. So I'll choose anonymize as generation method. I'll keep a Gaussian noise as it fits my wheel. And min max should stay the same. The standard deviation of noise, I'll increase it a bit. And I'll add 10 days of noise for the data. I'll save modifications, and I'll keep the constraint that end date should be greater than start date with a span of 1 year. I've generated fake data for due date and end date, but I still have the real data for project ID, project manager, project name, and start date. However, we will have analysis on delays, and so on. And we don't want to focus on project managers that will have fake delays, very high fake delays. So what I'll do is anonymize project manager's name so that we can say, okay, William Smith is having high delays, we should blame him or not. It's fake data, we can't blame anyone for anything, we'll just anonymize. So for this purpose, again, I'll use anonymize generation mode. And I'll use the names that are from the MKYD labels dataset. So I'll choose custom label here, default MKYD labels, and I'll choose full names so that the change is really apparent. I'll choose French labels, French full names. I'll save, and as you can see, in input I have names such as William Smith, Jesse Brown, and in output I have very typical French names such as Louis Moreau or Pierre Robert. Once I have done this, I have finished with this part of generation. So I'll just go to data generation. Here on the top, I can see the changes I've made. So I've changed project manager, I've added due date and end date. I've deleted 2 columns that were not useful. And here I can select the properties for my saving table. I'll keep the name projects. I'll save it to an Excel file and into this location. I can save the project if I don't want to save the data, but only the configuration. But for now, I'll just generate data. Once it is generated, I can open. And you'll see we have generated a due date column and an end date column. We see that the constraints are well maintained with due date higher than start date, later than start date, end date too. And now with this data, we can have a look, we can create some visualizations. So here I am on Tableau. I've already created some visualizations. We'll just import data by refreshing the data source. Once I refresh, we can have an analysis of the delay per year, which manager has highest delays or lowest delays. Of course, here is where it makes sense to anonymize the project manager's name so that Philippe Chevalier is not a proper manager from our company. You also can see which projects have the highest delays, lowest delays, and make an analysis to understand why do we have such delays in some projects and not in others. Also, why do we have such differences between 2020 and 2021 in terms of delays? Did we have an increase of projects? Did we have some changes in the company resources or so on? So this concludes the first part. Your managers were impressed with what you can do with this new data and decided to go on with your project management tool. A few months have gone by, and now we have created many visualizations on this new project management tool data. The tool offers now an update to also consider versions in the project. So each project consists of versions. More or less each month we have a new version with a new team that will work on the project. And so the update of the tool will lead to a change in the data structure. Now, as you have seen, we have 1 line per project. And in the future, with the update, we will have 1 line per version. You fear that this new data structure may lead to break your visualizations. And as you have many visualizations, you don't want to be updating these visualizations once the update has been done and lose time and resources in that. being critical and losing your visualizations. So what you will do is move your visualizations to a development project and start looking at how the new data structure will affect your visualizations. To do so, we can create we can replicate the structure with new versions per line for with MakeYourData, and I'll show you how. So I'll go back to MakeYourData, to configure generation, and I'll create two new columns. The first one will be the version date, and the second one will be a numerical column with the employees assigned to the given version. To generate, here we have one line per project in input, and I want to generate one line per version. To do so, I'll click on generate sub-elements. I'll say that I want to generate lines for each project ID. And the lines that I want to generate are for the subordinate, the version date and employees assigned. Doing this, project manager, project name, start date, due date, and end date will still be one per project, and we'll have employees assigned and version date that will be one per version. I'll generate lines through range of dates, and I'll say that for each project, we'll generate lines, version dates from start date to due date for each month. And the column that will have this date will be version date. So now if the project starts in March and goes on to August, we will have version dates for March, April, June, May, June, July, and August. I'll save. This has changed my generation methods for both subordinate columns to synthesize, as we will generate new data. Version date I won't change, and employees assigned I'll just change to integer, as we can have half an employee assigned. And I'll say that the generation method for the employees assigned is a statistical distribution, a flat distribution ranging from 1 to 10. I save the modifications and I go to data generation. So now we see that we have generated a version date and an employees assigned column. I'll keep the same save parameters as before. I'll generate data. We can have a look at the generated data. So now we see that each line represents one version with its date added, and we have employees assigned that is different for each version. We'll see how it affects our Tableau visualizations. So I just refresh the data. And once it's refreshed, we see that there's some issues with delays here. 297 days of delay for a single project seems a bit too high. Maybe we have to have a look at it. And what was the issue is that here on delays, I did a sum, but now delay is not only one project, it's several projects. So I have to change the sum to an average. Here also. And this seems like more realistic values of 27 days delays. I'll do the same for lowest delays. I'll change the visualization tool. And now I have fixed these issues. I can also show to the top management that we will benefit from this version analysis by creating a new dashboard with analysis of how many employees were assigned per month. We can see some patterns in the data. Here, for example, in November and December, we have many employees that are assigned. End of the year here, it's also true. So maybe we will have to either change the way projects are assigned to flatten a little bit the curve, or have more employees doing these high peak months and so on. So everybody is very happy with your project management tool, and the usage of this tool has increased much in the last month. You fear that with this increase of usage, people will start to make mistakes in the data entry as the user enter data in the tool, and you want your visualizations to be robust to these little errors. Maybe someone will type incorrectly the name of his manager when he enters the project manager name, or maybe he'll make a typo in the date. To be sure that this won't impact too much or break your visualizations, you can create fake data that will mimic some errors in the user entered data. To so we go back to MakeYourData. And as said before, I will add some errors to the project manager name. To so I go to configure distribution. And here in the lower part, we have the outliers section. We have several methods for creating errors in a string column. Either we can generate outliers. This will create very random strings with a certain percentage. We can permute, so we will change two lines data for the given column, or we can add an error that will simply switch one of the characters with a random character in the string. For the project manager, I'll just add an error with a percentage of 5%. And I'll also add an error to the end date. So again, configure distribution. And here I will generate outliers. So this will create dates that are very improbable to be generated realistically. I'll save the modification. And now I'll go to data generation. I'll just remove this column. And for data generation, now I can generate data. If we open the projects file, it's not always very well. Here it's clear that we have changed the name, but with so many lines, it's hard to find errors by eye. But when we enter in Tableau, if I refresh and I look at the delays analysis, we see that first of all, we have so many much more names in project manager. It breaks the view, so I'll just switch it to fit with, and I'll see what happened. Here, for example, we have Michel expression mark Garnier. It's quite weird, like we have also Michel Garnier here. So we see that there's been a typing error. Moreover, we see that here in the dates, we have very high delays, 20,000 days seems unrealistic. So these will clearly be outliers that have to be either removed or like sending a mail to the project manager like, hey, you've made an issue when typing, please correct this data, and so on. So that was all for the demo. If you want to test our product, we have a free trial available on the net. You just have to follow either the QR code or the website. And we have our next webinar on the 5th of July for using anonymization with MakeYourData. Thank you.
So thanks for following this webinar. If you have questions, we are still there for a couple of minutes. Otherwise, we wish you a good day. Very well. In this case, good day to everybody. We hope to see you in our next webinar, and go and use synthetic data.
Thank you.
Thank you.